Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, How to Foster More Women Leaders in Academic Medicine. My name is Erica Spicer-Mason, and I'm pleased to serve as your moderator today. And on behalf of Becker's Healthcare, thank you so much for joining us. So before we get started, I'm just going to walk through a few quick housekeeping instructions. To start, we'll begin today's webinar with a panel discussion, and we certainly welcome any comments or questions from the audience. You can go ahead and submit those throughout the webinar by typing them into the Q&A box that you see on your screen. Today's session is being recorded and will be available after the event. You can use the same link that you used to log into today's webinar to access the recording. And finally, if at any time you have trouble with your audio or your video, please just try refreshing your browser. You can also submit any technical questions into the Q&A box. We're here to help. So with that, let's go ahead and shift into our discussion. So today's conversation about women's leadership in academic medicine is a really important one. So there's a critical disconnect today. For example, 35% of physicians are women, and 54% of today's medical students are women. Yet women physicians occupy only a small fraction of leadership roles. According to data from the Association of American Medical Colleges, women account for only 16% of medical school deans, 18% of department chairs, and 25% of full professorships. Career advancement for women has lagged for reasons that are likely multifaceted. For example, a recent study from Harvard Business Review indicates that women in academic medicine have greater challenges finding mentors and sponsors compared to men. And this is likely contributing to career disparities down the line. So considering all of that, I'm really looking forward to diving in today and learning from our fantastic panel, especially on what they perceive to be the biggest challenges, barriers, and opportunities here. And so before we get started, I'd love to have each of our panelists just introduce themselves and share a little bit about their role in organization. So I have Dr. Higginbotham at the top of my screen on the left. So I'll go ahead and have you kick us off with intros, if you wouldn't mind.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here. My name is Dr. Eve Higginbotham. I'm professor of ophthalmology and a senior fellow at the Leonard Davis Institute at the University of Pennsylvania. And I'm also the Vice Dean for Inclusion, Diversity, and Equity. And because my comments later will be relevant to my additional roles, I'm a board member of Ascension, which is the second largest health system in the country in 20 states, as well as recently I joined the board of Mass Ioneer, which is part of the Mass General Brigham system in Boston. So very happy to be here. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Dr. Gross, you're next in the line. Would you mind sharing a bit about yourself?
Sure. Good morning, Erica. My name is John Gross, and I serve as the Vice Dean for Faculty and Clinical Affairs at the University of California, Irvine School of Medicine. We have a relatively integrated health enterprise, so my role oversees and helps manage workforce planning and compensation, but very close alignment with the health system CFO, the medical center, and strategy officer as we set strategy how to grow. I'm happy to be here and participate in this. I should share I'm a professor of surgery, and I constantly run across my unconscious biases. So I'm looking forward to the discussion and learning from the rest of you also.
Thanks for sharing that, Dr. Gross. Okay, how about Dr. Ware?
Thank you, Erica. Happy to be here as well. Look forward to the panel discussion. I'm Amy Ware. I'm the Dean at Texas A&M University School of Medicine here in Bryan College Station, Texas. I came as the Vice Dean of Education and Academic Programs in 2018, became the Interim Dean in 2019, and then applied and became the Permanent Dean in January of 2021. I'm a general surgeon by training, and I'm grateful to be leading the school and looking forward to our discussion. Thank you.
Fantastic. And how about Dr. Murin and then Dr. Lockhart?
Well, good morning and thank you for having me. I'm Susan Murin. I'm a professor of pulmonary and critical care medicine and the interim dean of the UC Davis School of Medicine. UC Davis is like my colleague at UCI, a very integrated academic medical center with a single hospital system at about a $4 billion operation and growing. I've spent the entirety of my career at UC Davis after a brief period of military service, so have served in a variety of roles, including head of our practice, chief of our medical staff, and chief of pulmonary critical care in the past.
Excellent, thank you. I'm happy to round out the bunch. Thank you, Erica. I'm Ellen Lockhart. I'm a principal at AMN Healthcare in the physician executive leadership branch, really helping to partner with academic institutions to find their next outstanding leaders. In my former life, I'm actually trained as an anesthesiologist. I'm an obstetric anesthesiologist, served at 3 different academic institutions, over 25 years. As a clinician, as a researcher, as a leader, a division chief, and then vice chair of a large academic department. Really happy to be here as part of this discussion. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you all so much again. And it's clear we have such a fantastic group with us with just, such an awesome mix of clinical, surgical, and academic experience. So I think we're going to get a lot of really interesting perspectives on this topic. And so to kind of start broadly and just to paint the picture for our audience, especially those folks who might not be directly involved in academia, I'm wondering if, Dr. Higginbotham, let's start with you. I'm going to pick on you again to kick us off. But what do you think are the unique challenges for women's career and leadership growth in academic medicine specifically, especially compared to other areas of healthcare? And maybe you could share a little bit about how you've experienced that in your career as well.
Well, certainly, John actually started off this conversation about bias. Bias is certainly very commonly noted in just about all of our processes, ranging from admissions to medical school to promotions as faculty, as well as identification of opportunities so that one can be advanced as leaders. So bias and discrimination still there. I think many people grow up thinking that a scientist or a physician should be a male in a white coat. And so that bias certainly is really working against us. Sexual harassment, we know that is highly prevalent. We know that from a National Academy report about 3 years ago, that in schools of medicine, as many as 20 to 50% of students are really experiencing sexual harassment, as well as, I would say, inequities in compensation as well as promotion, as I mentioned. So those are just a brief bullet points to start the conversation.
Yeah,
I would add assumptions about that people make about women. You have small children, so she's probably not interested in her career or advancing her career, and maybe we can ask her what she is interested in. So I think I've had a lot of those assumptions made about me at different times.
I'll echo Ellen in that I totally agree, and same that Eve said. And imposter syndrome, I think, is very real, especially for women in medicine, and whether that's a medical student or a resident or even beyond. I definitely talk to our medical students about that, and that's real. I'm also very proud to be first generation undergrad college, and sometimes that's a huge imposter syndrome. But to Eve's point, proving oneself to get to that point that you're worthy of some of these roles, I think is somewhat harder and more challenging.
And I'll follow on actually everyone's comments, but at the beginning, Eve mentioned, I think for those unaware, there's a long history in academic medicine of male dominance, and we're still coming out of that. So we're still, I hope, on the tail end of it, but we're certainly not out of it. And that has created some level of continuous obstacles and probably some level of systemic bias across it just because of our history. So we're working to get beyond that. And then I think it was probably Ellen who mentioned, I think, and, I was trying to speak as a man and represent how a woman must feel, but I can imagine, as physicians, we're all led to excellence. We all want to get an A on everything we do and overachieve. And how do you do that when you're an academic physician and an academic physician who's a mom and a wife and perhaps a caregiver for another family with all the social cultural expectations of what the female woman should do on top of all the academic background? So I think it really sets up for a lot of challenges and then also a lot of opportunities for us to help improve.
And I concur with what my colleagues have said and to build on that just a little bit. I think one of the most challenging things for women in academic medicine are the societal expectations of women outside the home. And I think until those duties are shared fairly, a career in academic medicine will prove more challenging for women, because while those same challenges of balancing home responsibilities and career are true in any profession, ours is a profession of 80-hour work weeks, which make that all the more challenging. And men are more likely to have supportive partners in the home, and women are more likely to be those supportive partners. So it really sets things up. And I'll just tell a little anecdote. When I started 28 years ago on the faculty here, I was told that it was tradition for the MICU attending to bring in breakfast for the team on Sundays. And I asked my colleague, "Oh, what kind of things do people usually bring?" And he said, "Well, my wife just bakes something." And I said, "Well, I'm going to need a different approach." But those are the sorts of things. And then I'll also build on the idea about sort of confidence. I mean, studies have shown that women are not likely to apply for higher level positions unless they feel they meet almost all the criteria for those positions, whereas men will apply when they meet like a third of the criteria. In other words, we undersell ourselves and aren't as willing to put ourselves out there sometimes as our male colleagues, and therefore don't get those opportunities. And that's how we're socialized, I think, in a culture.
Yeah, I mean, I can really speak to that, on the other side now, on the recruiting side, where women are nominated for positions and they say, "Oh, I'm not certainly not qualified," and you start going through. And you see, you most certainly are qualified. Actually, you're already leading. And it's interesting.
Yeah, I certainly would like. Sorry, John.
No, go
I
ahead.
certainly would like to highlight the intersectionality of roles, but also the intersectionality of social identities. As a woman of color, there are additional barriers that are presented in the workplace. And I mean, one of the things in the way that I was formed, growing up in New Orleans, is that you need to have confidence in yourself. And so when I speak to students of color in particular, because they're so early in their careers, I actually suggest that imposter syndrome doesn't apply to them, because we already are coming into the workplace with societal barriers. And so it's really your confidence that will drive you forward. The imposter syndrome does not help us. It certainly hinders us. And it's important for us to have that confidence.
I think, I was going to add one other distinction, and Susan kind of led into it. But, if you think, because of our history in academic medicine and a lot of the rest of healthcare, I think has caught up at more senior leadership levels. It's funny, if you look at this screen, I'm the only man. If you look at a lot of other senior leaderships in academic medicine, it might be flipped, right? So, I think another challenge for women early or even mid-career is they don't have those people above them that can help them step up or just be a great mentor and sponsor, for their growth. We still have a lack of equity at senior leadership levels.
Thank you all so much for those perspectives. As we've talked about, we've covered a lot of ground already. We've talked about bias, pay gaps, imposter syndrome, that academic history of male dominance, and also coupled with societal expectations of how women should be operating outside of the home. We can reflect on a lot of progress that's been made in those areas, but there's still a long way to go. And I know we could probably talk about this for hours, but I'd also like to take those challenges and kind of look at them through the lens of something we talked about just a little bit earlier, which is sponsorship and career development in academia. So Dr. Murin, I'm hoping I can tap on you here just for your perspective, especially with your role at UC Davis. Considering all of these challenges, what do you recommend to women in academic medicine to really ensure that they have those sponsorship and career advancement opportunities? And any kind of best practices or examples you could share would be great too.
Well, let me start by saying that given the dearth of women in the highest levels of leadership, one should not hesitate to have male mentors. And I would say that that was critical for me in the early stages of my career. When I went into pulmonary critical care medicine, it was, I think, 96% male. There weren't a lot of female mentors. There was one junior faculty member who was a woman when I was a fellow at Yale. And for many years, I was the only female faculty member at UC Davis in my field. So had I held out for female mentors, I would have been sorely lacking. So I was very, very fortunate to have some male mentors who were mentors and sponsors of my career. So I think you have to cast a wide net and don't expect your mentors to be, necessarily of your same gender. So I think you have to put yourself out there. Networking has been really, really helpful. That's one of the things mentors do, is introduce you to others and help you to build that network, which then grows over time. I found getting very involved with my specialty societies was crucial, to meet people across the country, because your mentor and your sponsor is not necessarily down the hallway from you. In fact, some of my most valued mentors were across the country. So I think network, keep your eyes open to lots of opportunities for those who can help you. Put yourself out there. I mean, I always tell people that they ask me how I got started in leadership. And I say, those committees they tell you not to do, if you actually do them, and you're one of the small minority of people who does your homework, does the work, next thing you know, you're the chair of that committee, and then you're asked to be on a whole lot of other things, and your name comes up. So do the little things really well early in your career, and they will lead to bigger things. I could go on, but I'm sure my colleagues have lots of wisdom to share.
I can echo Susan. I agree completely. Having a wide net of mentors, male, female, and not just in your specialty. Some of my best mentors to date, and still needing mentors the entire aspect of your career from beginning until end, have not been in surgery and have been that perspective taking and that value. And again, all mentors are important, but seeking out those mentors and actively nourishing, and it'll develop as you go along. And some you'll leave behind and they'll leave you behind, and that's fine. And you get and develop new ones. But asking for mentorship, that's what I tell the medical students, is not everyone's going to come say, hey, can I mentor you? You need to actively ask. And in my entire career, I think I've only asked one person to be my mentor, and she turned me down. And it was because she said, I just won't be able to dedicate the time to you, Amy. And that's okay too. So I do think mentorship is super important, and we can discuss the difference between that and sponsorship, but supporting each other too, right? And pulling each other up, as Ellen had said, and looking for opportunities for other individuals, particularly other women in academic medicine, and opening that door or that window, as Susan said, for committees, and giving them information around how they can be seen at a national level, I think is important.
Certainly, I agree with my colleagues on the importance of being involved nationally, as well as expanding your network. Really seeking a sponsor is sometimes more difficult, because if you're a junior professional, it's hard to really seek out a sponsor who might be 2 or 3 levels above you. And that's where I think institutionally, we can do a better job of ensuring there's an infrastructure that develops sponsors who I think should be department chairs. I know when I was a department chair at University of Maryland some years ago, I really considered sponsorship as a core responsibility of my position. And I think we need to really bake that into leaders across all of academic medicine, because the department chairs and executive leaders are in the best position to be sponsors.
Yeah, I think that the difference between mentorship and sponsorship is so important, and it's something I didn't really think about early in my career, but and I agree with the comments about having many mentors, because the likelihood that you're going to get everything you need from one person is very small, and you need different perspectives. But a mentor can really help give you career advice and direction and help you sort of shape your career. But if they're not, I guess, at the table where you're trying to go, bad grammar, but if, they're not sitting at that table and they don't have that kind of power or authority or stature or whatever you want to call it, they can't help you. You need somebody with that kind of authority so that they can, help put you out there. And of course, it takes building a relationship. They have to have confidence in you, and you're doing the work, and they're giving some of their credibility when they nominate you. So it's kind of a two-way street, and it's a relationship that's built over time. So I think that really going back to the point of putting yourself out there and reaching out to people and establishing multiple relationships, I think is really how you start. And then these relationships will develop over time.
Absolutely. Thank you all for those responses. I really picked up on this theme of having to advocate for yourself and to be bold and ask for the opportunities that you'd like to have access to. You might not always get a yes, but the worst answer you can hear is no. And so I appreciate, kind of having that theme there. And also at the same time, Dr. Higginbotham alluded to this a bit in her response, but there's also, of course, responsibility on the institution side as well to ensure that those opportunities are there. So I'm curious if, Dr. Gross, let's hear from you on this one. How do you think academic medicine is really evolving to better support women and to make these opportunities more available or more apparent? What are your thoughts there?
Thank you. Well, I think there's several ways, and I can share some local examples. But we have to make the workplace more friendly to those who don't want to work full time. So for one example, in the last few years, historically there'd been a bias toward trying to hire people who could only work full time, and if you worked less than that, not only were you potentially punished financially, you were potentially punished, by career advancement. And as other, folks have mentioned on the team, there's the bias to think you're not interested, but it's really because you're interested. But at this moment in time, you can't do 100%, and we can't lose. Historically, I think we lost a lot of folks from a lot of women from the workforce because of that. So I think policy changes that reflect modern day realities. We have to be real about what happens in life. So policy changes are one. Another one I think that has been extremely well received locally, and it grew out of the national program called ELAM. So we currently a sponsorship between the dean's office and the department. We currently have 3 folks attending ELAM. I think the last cycle we had 1. So we aggressively advocate that. And it was so successful and well received through the dean's office in 2021. Sort of a local women's leadership in academic medicine academy was set up so that there's also this local type of organization to help with things have been discussed, mentoring, and to try and look for appropriate sponsors. And then one other I want to mention, I try to, it's like, particularly for men, is to be open to not knowing what we don't know, because sometimes we're just plainly unaware, and then being able to receive that. I want to share a quick example, and I'm glad Dr. Ware shared she was a general surgeon, because she'll probably appreciate this. My whole life I've been a surgeon. This 3 or 4 days ago, we had a summer surgery school for high school students. They were all asked to come up with innovative projects. One of the high school students' teams identified a big issue. Surgical instruments are made from men's hands. There's no female set of surgical instruments. They're different sized gloves, but think of that historic kind of implicit, understated bias. How might that feel? I don't want to, Dr. Ware, I'll have you expand on it, but when it hit me upside the head, the high school students saw this, and I, the surgeon my whole life, didn't appreciate the significance of it. So just being open and aware as a man, I think is, hopefully helping to shift that culture along the way. So
That was a great story, John. And until you said that, I really had never thought of that. And that's very pertinent. And the fact that a high school student saw that and that outside perspective, that's invaluable.
Mm-hmm.
Well, as an ophthalmologist and ophthalmic surgeon, our instruments are actually perfect for women. So you would think that we would have more representation, but certainly that's a very interesting observation.
I want to comment. I think among the more valuable things we've done at our organization to help women is to be much more generous with paternity leave. Because I think that this disproportionate set of expectations of women and men around child rearing starts right there. And I've heard it over the years where I've had chairs who vocalize that they don't want to hire a woman because of the costs, both monetary costs and just structural scheduling, coverage costs of them taking maternity leave. And by us having a very, very generous paternity leave policy and encouraging men to utilize it, we equalize time away almost. I insisted that women have a little more time since we actually have the child, but men get 8 weeks and women get 12. And that evens the playing field a little bit. It makes the risks associated with hiring a woman and potential leaves around child rearing not so disproportionate. And so I think that has been really, really important because again, it evens the playing field. And I agree with Dr. Gross around smoothing the way toward part-time employment, but I think that should be for both men and women. And in fact, early in my career, I felt that again, as the only woman faculty member, that I couldn't go part-time without harming not just my career, but the careers of those who might follow me. But my husband, also a physician, went part-time. That was more acceptable in his practice setting. But I think normalizing part-time work while still being cognizant of the fact that that may disadvantage women who already earn less than men and are known to spend more time with our patients, et cetera, that you have to be careful about it, that you don't disadvantage women as you encourage part-time work.
I think it's important to highlight the fact that women still are expected to have this dual role, and having work-life integration is really the challenge. And as evidence in the report that was shared with us, more women physicians are burning out compared to men in general. So it's important to recognize that. I do want to thank John for recognizing ELAM. I think some of us are ELUMs around the table. I actually did that program. It's quite effective. But also the Doris Duke Foundation has actually adopted a program that was actually initially done at Mass General, where they would have opportunities for women who take time out to do caregiving, take on caregiving responsibilities, to actually get funding so that they can support their research, so that they have a smoother reentry back into the workforce. And so that's, I think, another one of those programs that observes the dual role and the fact that academic medicine needs to do something institutionally to actually level the playing field.
I'd like to also give a shout out to the American Medical Association, who has had 3 consecutive female presidents. And I think that's outstanding. And they're an organization that's putting their money where their mouth is, I think. So that's great.
It's a great example, Dr. Ware. Oh, go ahead, Dr. Gross. I didn't mean to cut you off.
Oh, no. I was thinking, and I'll toss this out, and I'd love how my colleagues feel about it. But, as leaders that have sometimes influence over who takes on other leadership roles, for example, say in a department chair has probably strong influence over the program director and the various vice chairs. I think historically, there's probably been a tendency to advance women into some of the leadership roles that tend to be more gender biased, that might be more of the caring, mothering, like, residents need a lot of help and support and a lot of patience. Historically, I think probably some of those roles were directed more to women than men. And then therefore, men probably tended to pull men to maybe the leadership roles that led to finance or that led to strategy. And I'm curious what my colleagues have you experienced that? Because I'm starting to think about it in my past. I think I observed that.
There was actually recently a paper that analyzed decanal roles and noted that men are more likely to be chief research officers, whereas women are usually the student affairs deans. So I know it's been analyzed at the decanal level. And you're right. I mean, there's this presumption that certain roles will fit certain personality types as well as sex and gender.
And those roles aren't as likely to lead to higher level positions, right?
I really appreciate you bringing that up, Dr. Gross. And I know I just want to give you a shout out too. I know you're kind of in the hot seat as our resident male presenter. So, really appreciate you chiming in with that. And I'm really sensing that, a lot of the challenges that we've brought up are stemming from policy and education roots. So I know that, of course, those are the meaningful changes we need to make, and that's the progress that needs to be made. But it's not easy. Those are the really foundational, systemic, kind of core parts of organizations. And so I'm curious if any examples come to mind. I know we've talked about ELAM. I hope I'm saying that acronym correctly. I know we've already touched on a few organizations and examples of places that are doing this well, making these changes, but I'd love to hear some more examples if you have them. Dr. Higginbotham, I see you taking yourself off of mute, so I want to hear from you. And then also afterwards, Dr. Lockhart, just given your work with AMN Healthcare, I'm sure you have examples as well.
Well, I'll just briefly review 3 institutions, beginning with my home institution. 30% of our department chairs are women. I think we saw the national average at 18%. So a lot of that has to do with the way we search. We do a lot of focus on unconscious bias education at the beginning of the search process. My office applies a database of individuals who would be likely candidates for the position. So now we have about 2,000 in our database at peer institutions that we can draw upon, so we can give this information to search committees. So there has to be some intentionality. So that would be one lesson. A second organization would be Ascension. More than half of the executive leaders are women, including the chief financial officer of this multi-billion-dollar institution that serves underserved populations in 20 states in our country, as well as the chief strategy officer, chief nursing officer, chief experience officer, and on the board diversity is also very important. Half of us are women, and that includes myself. I head the quality committee. So having the diversity at the board level is critically important, as well as a leadership development program, which is baked into the organization. And about 40% of individuals in our leadership development program at Ascension are women. So we have a pipeline. And then finally, Mass Eye and Ear, the chief of ophthalmology there is a woman, and more than half of her faculty, Harvard Ophthalmology, are women. She's actively mentoring and sponsoring her faculty, and certainly there is this focus on leadership development as well. So having a baked-in leadership development program, having intentionality at the highest levels, having the core values align with intentionality around inclusive excellence. These are all components, I think, that contribute to success.
Yeah, I would just really talk about that intentionality. I think it's so important. I think that the leadership development programs, institutions that have those type programs are really shining. I think even just highlighting leaders. I think it's Johns Hopkins Medicine has a very nice leadership, page, women in leadership, and it, just a brief story of each of them, and it just kind of shows they're across the institution in finance and nursing leadership and just kind of across the board. I think it says a lot. I think when institutions are recruiting, even if for example, you have a department where you don't have a lot of women leaders, you can have a search committee with women leaders on it. And I've had candidates who said, initially didn't want to apply to that department because why would I want to lead a department as a woman with no women? But then I saw this search committee of all these accomplished women, and it let me know that at this institution, women are succeeding. So I think, I think that just being intentional, promoting leaders from within, things like that really go a long way.
And I will say that obviously there's always more work to be done, but I feel very fortunate to be at UC Davis. Our last 3 deans were women. Our prior hospital CEO was a woman. Our current CFO is a woman, and we have an array of female department chairs. They're never quite enough. And I think part of that is culture. I mean, for several decades, we have had an office of women in medicine and the health sciences who have really done a lot to advance the careers of women. We're one of the main, I think one of the schools that has had the most ELAM graduates among the top few by sending people, every year that we can. I went 20 years ago myself to ELAM, and there's just an awareness at our highest level searches. We have a DEI rep who supports the committee and keeps people, cognizant of potential biases and make sure that we have adequate applicant pools. Our search will be invalidated if we have not sourced an adequate pool of applicants, right? We would not be allowed to proceed with a search if all it had was white male applicants. We really have to do our work to source a broad array of applicants for all of our positions. And I think it ultimately pays off.
Thank you so much, Dr. Murin. So as you're all, sharing this with me, I'm thinking about how wonderful programs like this must kind of come from a culture of a workplace that is progressive and forward-thinking. And I'm sure not every organization is there. We know that to be the case. But Dr. Ware, I know you mentioned earlier how you made that transition from the surgical space into academic medicine. I know there was some overlap, it sounds like, but maybe you can give our audience an idea of kind of workplace culture characteristics to look out for in academic medicine. What are those characteristics that kind of signal that this is a place that wants to help women grow in their leadership and development? Do you have any pointers?
Yes, certainly. I think to Eve's point, that intentionality of the culture, that we're purposely wanting inclusive and diverse perspective from all types of backgrounds. And also, we mentioned before the core values, and part of the reason I came to Texas A&M is we're very much into our core values, and it's not just a sign on the wall. I mean, most hospital systems, most institutions have their core values, on the wall and in the mission vision website. But Texas A&M really lives them in their respect and excellence, leadership, loyalty, integrity, and selfless service. And I came here because we try to live those values. And I think looking for an institution that, again, just doesn't have it on the wall, that really, wants to develop leadership, wants to have integrity and do the right thing, is the framework or the foundation of any organization. And I will admit, sometimes it's hard to determine that until you're in it, right? And knowing if that's truly how it is. But looking, and you can have those discussions, I think, when you're interviewing, and you can figure some of that out and you can ask, but knowing that that's what you're getting into. And then once you're a leader in that, male or female, abiding by and living those. And I think it's even most important to model them to others, not just to say we're going to do it, but to model it.
Yeah, I'm seeing a lot of nodding heads. Does anyone else want to build on that?
Yes, I just want to add to the comment about culture. At the University of Pennsylvania, Penn Medicine, we've been measuring our culture using the AAMC Diversity Engagement Survey, which really does actually measure over 8 constructs inclusive excellence. And we share that information publicly, so you can actually see our progress. I mean, we're still working on, for instance, access to opportunities, which really speaks to where we need to do our work on sponsorship. So if there is either a cultural audit, such as diversity engagement survey, or if one could actually view the strategic plan of the institution with the core values, those would be good starting points to really see if there would be alignment with your own core values and potential match.
I
Great
think also
advice.
understanding what the, as a young faculty member, what the promotion criteria are, maybe not, in specific detail, but just kind of understanding, what the expectations are going to be, if there's a formal mentoring process, as we've talked about, where you're sort of on your own to find your mentors. Is there a mentoring process in place? I think those type of sort of cultural things are really important. A lot of applicants want to know those things now before they look at an institution. Is there flexibility with working either part-time or limited time? Can you kind of come in and out of that as needed? I think those things are meaningful to, especially to our younger faculty members.
And also understanding the faculty tracks. I
Yes.
think so many folks will come into an academic institution, think they're going to be an academician, but then they're in a clinical track and they have to do 90% clinical work where they thought they were signing up for an academic career. And so I see that so often occur where people are not being mindful about what they're really signing up for.
Yeah, it really sounds like transparency is the key here, whether that's transparency in a mission statement and seeing it carried out in the day-to-day work, or career pathways and communicating that effectively to staff. Transparency really seems to be the key. Well, this has been so great. I feel like we've already touched on so many tangible ways that organizations can start to make progress here. And to kind of close this out, I would love if I could get from each of you, if you have a piece of advice that you would give to anybody, women who are trying to grow their career in this field, what would that piece of advice be? And I'd love to get a response from all of you, but maybe we'll start with Dr. Gross.
I would say to always believe in your potential and believe that you belong. Believe that you have a seat at the table, even if you're the first one at the table. We've talked about the mechanisms that might help some of those opportunities, but I think if you believe that you should be there, that's probably one of the things I'd suggest.
Fantastic. Dr. Murin, how about you?
I guess I would say there's no job too small to be worth doing right. I think careers are built on delivering excellence in everything you're asked to do, and that leads to more opportunities. And then I would say, please be sure to extend a hand down and help other people up as you rise.
Wonderful. Dr. Ware?
Yes, I would say never let anyone say you cannot do that. Like, you could never be a dean, or you could never be a general surgeon. You don't have the personality. Prove them wrong.
Love that. Prove them wrong. There is no better motivation than that. So how about Dr. Higginbotham, and then Dr. Lockhart, maybe you can round us out.
Yes, I would say, building on John's comment, know your worth. You are your best cheerleader. And as I think about my time as a medical student, coming from an engineering background and coming into this subjective world of medicine, I realized that there were going to be barriers that were going to be put in front of me that I would have no control over, but I knew that I could do the work. So it's a matter of actually believing in yourself and knowing your worth.
Great. Yeah, I would just say, just building on all of that, I agree with all of that so much. I would say, don't be afraid to vocalize your aspirations and find people that are in your corner.
Absolutely. Well, those are all great pieces of advice. And, I can't thank you all enough for being wonderful and engaging panelists today, and, having those discussions amongst yourselves as well. I can tell how much passion there is behind this topic. And that's really reassuring, to know that this is all in motion in academic medicine. And so thank you all again for being here today.
Thank you
And
so
I'd
much.
Well, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Say we'd also like to thank AMN Healthcare as well for sponsoring today's webinar. And if any audience members would like to learn more about the content that was presented today, you can go ahead and check out the resources section on your webinar console, and be sure to fill out the post-webinar survey as well. So thank you all again for joining us. We hope you have a wonderful rest of the day.